After viewing Sean Combs' The Reckoning, it was clear to me that a very important part of this story is missing. The piece that was missing was what happens when unresolved trauma meets power, fame, and with no internal limits or even external limits.
I know people are shaped by pain as well as by love. And if it was more pain than love, watch out. It's going to be pain that you're going to give others because you're responding to that pain that you just can't seem to cut out of you.
Those words are powerful, and I want to pause here and speak directly to you, the viewer. Experiencing trauma does not automatically mean that you are destined to hurt others. Trauma impacts people in very different ways. Some individuals endure significant trauma and direct most of that pain inward. The greatest harm they experience is the harm that they do to themselves, not to others. Others may externalize their pain and hurt those around them, and that, too, exists on a spectrum and varies in degree. What matters most is not only the presence of trauma, but more so how it is processed, supported, and held over time. What's also important to name clearly is that when trauma goes unexamined and doesn't stay contained within the person, it can shape how power is used, how boundaries are disregarded, and how other people are hurt, violated, abused, and traumatized.
You've abused everyone and used most everyone. There are horror stories like this all throughout.
Also, as a therapist, know that I am not here to diagnose. I'm approaching this video through a trauma-informed developmental lens, looking at how early experiences can shape a person, along with the added impact of fame, power, and wealth.
It was like the more money he got, the more power he got, the more power he got, the more money he got. And he always felt like money can get him out of everything.
Hi, I'm Dr. Pam, therapist and relationship counselor. Welcome to my channel. I'm so glad that you're here. And before I go further, I want to be very clear. This documentary includes serious allegations of abuse and assault against many women and men. The trauma done to others described in this documentary has profoundly affected many people. The harm described is serious and life-altering, and nothing that I share today is meant to soften, excuse, minimize, or contextualize abuse in a way that excuses anything. Understanding trauma does not reduce responsibility. It helps us understand the potential impact of trauma, but it never makes harm acceptable. Also, I am intentionally not analyzing the allegations themselves. I am sure that many others are covering that. Most of this documentary focuses on those allegations and outcomes. What's largely missing here is a deeper understanding of how someone is formed psychologically long before power and fame enter into the picture, and then the additional added impact of power, fame, and wealth. I'm going to reference Sean Combs throughout this video because that's the context of this documentary, but what I also want is for you to listen to the pattern more than the person. And I will be showing you clips throughout this video from all 4 episodes. As I started watching the very first episode in this documentary, my thought was, where did all this begin? And then we hear from Sean's childhood friend.
Andre is taking him under like a son. Andre is the very first patriarch he connected with. Sean grew up with the illusion of what masculinity looks like.
According to Kirk, Sean's childhood friend, who is described almost like a brother, Sean's first meaningful connection with a patriarchal figure didn't occur until young adulthood. From a trauma-informed perspective, early absence of a stable father figure can shape how authority, safety, and identity are experienced later in life. That's important to keep in mind as we move forward in this video.
My father's name is Melvin Combs. I didn't get a chance to get to know him. I was too young. My father, he's like on Central Park West. I did the research. They said my mother had brought me to the funeral on a full-length chinchilla.
According to public sources, Sean was just over 2 years old when his father was murdered. Trauma that occurs early in life matters because when a child experiences trauma without adequate support to process it, aspects of emotional development can become stalled at that age. And then later in adulthood, this can show up as emotional immaturity.
I'm going to get whatever I want, I have to get!
Difficulties with emotional regulation or rigid coping strategies such as controlling behavior, lashing out, and a lack of boundaries.
It was like a sigh of relief, you know what I'm saying? Because I finally knew that what I was feeling was true, you know what I'm saying? That I was a son of a hustler or a gangster.
We don't know what age Sean was when he learned that his father had been involved in hustling and criminal activity. He shares that discovering this brought a sense of relief, that it validated a feeling he already carried about his father. What we don't know is the internal impact of that realization. So let's step back from Sean specifically and look at this from a more broader perspective. For a child, especially a young boy, a father often plays a central role in identity formation and modeling. When a father is absent, unknown, or later revealed to be unsafe or unhealthy, the child is left to make meaning on their own. And that can create confusion around who the father was, who the child is, and what it means to be a man. And in those situations, children often cope in one of two ways. They either idealize the parent they never fully know, or they seek models of masculinity, power, and belonging elsewhere. Or they do both.
Melvin's presence was there. His money was there. And I understood that Melvin made a lot of things possible.
We don't know what Sean's father's money made possible in his early life, but we do know that his father's presence was felt even in his absence. For a child, the loss of a parent often leads to idealization, especially when that parent is gone and can't be known in a full or complex way. So when a child later sees that money connected to that parent, even money earned through criminal activity, it created access, opportunity, or security, and it can shape their understanding of how survival works.
You're gonna take all of this power and money you're getting now and play by the rules? No, I'm the rule now. I am the exception to the rule.
The message can become safety, stability, and value come from money and power, regardless of the impact that it has on those around you.
Sean's mom was his everything.
If you look at some of the early pictures that Janice has of Sean, she was always making him into something. The hats, fur coats. I think she tried to overcompensate for the father being gone by making him into this dandy.
So Sean also idealized his mother, which is not uncommon for a child, especially after the loss of a parent. What matters isn't the idealization, but what it was teaching him about who he should be. And according to Kirk, Sean's mother played a significant role in shaping his identity. He describes her as possibly overcompensating by encouraging a polished image focused on presentation, what he refers to as dandyism. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with that term, I'll include a link below for context. From a trauma-informed lens, when a child experiences early loss, identity formation often becomes closely tied to what earns approval, admiration, or protection. So what that means then is presentation and your image and visible signs of worth can become the primary way insecurity is managed and safety is established. And when identity becomes forming around external validation rather than internal security, it can set the stage for patterns that resurface later in adulthood, especially when power, fame, and influence enter into the picture.
It's absolute power and control. You belittle someone to make them live in fear of you. You can control a person once you break them down like that.
Come on, finish up.
And while none of this definitely determines an outcome, it helps us understand how certain patterns can quietly take root and later become reinforced. Caregivers shape identity, and sometimes without intention, those dynamics can contribute to how trauma is experienced and carried forward.
And then we had these movies we'd watch.
It's got to be number one.
this genre of films called black exploitation. Super Dude. You had Superfly, you had The Mac. Their parts were hustler parts. In Sean's household, you start to see all the stuff that you saw in the movies.
So now add another layer, the influence of movies. Films can function as powerful models, or I should say the people in those films, especially for a child who is already searching for identity and meaning. And when those portrayals align with the image he has carried of his father, strength, power, control, and status, they don't just entertain, they reinforce a narrative. They offer a template for what masculinity, survival, and success are supposed to look like.
Janice knew how to throw a party. And the parties were packed. You got ladies that look like they're straight out of a Jet magazine. Some brothers up there, you know, if you want to call them pimps, you can. If you want to call them hustlers, you can.
What children are exposed to leaves an impression. And when that exposure comes from the person they admire most, it carries even more weight. Being around glamour, hustlers, and adult social scenes at a young age can shape what a child comes to associate with success, belonging, and power long before they're old enough to even question it, understand it, or put it into context.
There was a stage in her living room, literally a stage, and that's where we used to have to go and dance. And everybody's calling you baby, and everybody's saying, do that dance.
Add to that yet another layer, being placed on display as a child, put on stage in your own home to perform for adults. For some children, performing can be innocent and self-directed, a child dancing because they want to do so at a family gathering. But when that performance happens in an adult environment marked by glamour, hustlers, and status, it can shape what a child internalizes as normal. Over time, the child may learn that attention, approval, and belonging come from being watched, admired, or entertaining others. So from a trauma-informed perspective, that early exposure can blur boundaries and place a child in an adult role before they are developmentally ready to understand that impact. And that matters because early lessons about visibility, approval, and belonging can shape how someone seeks connection, power, and validation later in life.
Now, mind you, as a child, Sean was goofy. Kids would pick on him a lot around the block. And he didn't know how to defend himself.
I'm not entirely sure what is meant when Sean is described as goofy as a child. On one level, that can mean innocence or playfulness. At the same time, we hear that he was picked on, which adds another layer of trauma. When a child's natural traits are not accepted and are instead ridiculed, the child begins to question which parts of themselves are allowed to exist. And without guidance or protection, a child may start to split their identity, suppressing the parts that are rejected and leaning into the parts that seem to offer safety and respect.
He thinks he's Black Superman. I can do what I want.
And over time, this creates an internal conflict. Do I survive as a playful child, or do I survive by aligning with power and toughness?
You've said I would be 12 years old, and sometimes I'd be out until 3, 4 in the morning.
James, we don't have to get into that right now.
Ma'am?
Got a lot of beatings, too.
At 12 years old, being out until 3 or 4 in the morning shows a lack of parental boundaries and protection at a developmental stage when structure, supervision, and safety are essential. Boundaries are what makes us feel safe as children, and rather than reinforcing needed boundaries, his mother dealt with that with beatings. Let's see what his childhood friend says about those beatings.
His beatings made me scared, right? I got beatings now. But when he got his beatings, it wasn't a joking thing. Nah. Damn, I hate thinking about that, man.
I found this jarring. For his friend to acknowledge that he was beaten, but to say that Sean's beatings made him scared, so much so that he can't think about them now because it's painful. That points to something deeper. From a trauma perspective, this suggests layered trauma. On one hand, there was a lack of consistent safety and boundaries, being out until 3 or 4 in the morning at a very young age. And then on the other hand, there were fear-based consequences for that lack of structure. When a child is given adult-level freedom without protection and then punished harshly for the very behavior that freedom makes possible, it creates confusion and fear and instability in how a child understands safety and authority.
My mother was, I guess, raising me for the real world. She was always taught me if somebody hit me, make sure I hit them back harder. Make sure they never hit me again. Make sure I come up.
There are parents who teach their children to fight back. From a trauma-informed perspective, that message can land very differently depending on the environment a child is growing up in. For a child in an unsafe and unpredictable environment, force can become associated with survival. What's important to be clear about is this: when someone later gains wealth, power, and fame, those early beliefs can increase risk, meaning they are risky to be around if they are never examined or challenged. They can become far more dangerous if they are never challenged.
I know him more than most people. He's very good at mental games.
I'm the king!
He's very good at getting up under your skin. He's very good at attacking your fears.
I'm not everybody else!
And he's very good at retaliation.
Power removes external limits, wealth reduces consequences, and fame can distort accountability. When trauma remains unresolved and power goes unchecked, empathy can erode, and without empathy, the pain of others is easier to dismiss, ignore, and disregard.
You know how you hear your mom's voice in your ear? Boy, you better. Boy? Sean started fighting. He started stepping up. But Sean don't fight like this. Sean's gonna bite you. He's gonna eat your ear off. He's gonna cut your neck open with his mouth. He's not losing.
And here's the pattern that gets learned. Survival means doing whatever it takes to gain the upper hand, to overpower, to overwhelm, to make sure you don't lose.
This was his MO. Ego, power, tripping.
These kids were young. They were naive.
Boom! Boom!
He was like just running them in the ground.
Life could be worse. Think about it. It could be worse.
When a child learns that safety comes from escalating rather than being protected, power becomes the solution to fear. And when that belief carries into adulthood, especially alongside fame, wealth, and influence, the potential for causing trauma and harm to others increases. Power removes limits, and without accountability, other people can be deeply hurt.
Y'all witnessing Jesus walking on water. You know what I'm saying? Or Jesus having a breakthrough. You know what I'm saying? Because I can only compare myself to the Son of God. You feel me?
What matters to say clearly is this: when that survival rule carries into adulthood and then is combined with fame, wealth, and influence, the risk escalates. External limits disappear, consequences are reduced, and there is greater opportunity to misuse that power. We know that that does not excuse harm. It highlights why accountability and restraint matter even more, because the impact on others is very real, traumatizing, and life-altering.
Well, something eventually happens. You can't continue to keep hurting people and nothing ever happens.
Understanding how trauma, power, and identity intersect helps us see the risk more clearly, but it never lessens responsibility. Harm is harm, and those who are harmed deserve accountability from those who hurt you. They deserve protection and to be taken seriously. Thank you so much for watching.